Hello everyone, it is the Game, Morality, and Movie Boy here. I'm back with another video. Today is going to be a review video on another Pixar film. And since we did the first Cars movie, it's time to tackle the sequel to Cars, Cars 2. Yep, diving into Cars 2. Now, Cars 2, I have an interesting relationship with this one. This movie basically introduced me to Pixar because I was not born when, Pixar was making, the hits like The Incredibles, or I don't think I was old enough to see Up. Cars 2 was the first Pixar movie I saw when I was a kid. I think I was like about maybe 3 or 2 when I saw this, so I was kind of like the ripe age to watch this movie. And yeah, it's changed a lot over the years. I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't think Pixar made any like terrible movies, not yet so far. I think all the movies have been so far have been really amazing to mediocre. And I think this is probably maybe the lowest of the mediocre films. But I mean, it depends when I get through all the Pixar films and, do my ranking of all of them. So yeah, Cars 2 is an interesting film. I think it's, it's a, there's a lot of flaws to it, but let's just review it because, again, it's not I won't say it's a terrible movie, but it's a pretty flawed film and not it's not anywhere near good. So yeah, I saw this as, a young kid. I didn't see the first Cars movie because, I was not even born when the first one came out. So yeah, I was kind of born in between Cars 1 and 2. And like I said, Cars 1 was kind of like, a low-hanging fruit for this one. This is probably the lowest hanging fruits I ever had because, but let's get into the review, starting with the positives for Cars 2. I will say that it's not all bad. There's some elements I can actually enjoy in this film. Some of the side characters are passable in this film. I'm talking about, Luigi and, Guido's uncle, like, I don't know, Topolino, I think his name. I don't even remember most of the characters. I mean, I think I watched, the probably Cars 2 the most, maybe? It depends, Not out of all the Pixar films. I think Toy Story 2 might be the one I watched the most when I was a kid. But, Cars 2 was probably the one I watched the most in 2010. And, it changed a lot over the years as I aged, Because, I thought the movie was good when I was young, but it was not good when I, aged as I age. So yeah, I say some of the side characters are passable. I think they're okay. I like the racers, the racers we have in this one. I think it's a unique concept that we kind of go from a small town concept with the first cars, and then go up to basically a global go charting adventure. My next positive is that the movie actually tries to do different ideas compared to the other, movie sequels, because, instead of movie sequels seem to, try to copy the original and to a lesser effect, but I like that Cause 2 tries to go in a pretty interesting direction with, it still having the elements of Cause, but, putting a spy thriller. Don't worry, we're gonna get into the execution when we get to the negatives, or the mix, as I would say. Like I said, I think it's good. Now we're getting into the more specific scenes I like about Cars 2. I like the opening scene, to be honest. I really like the title card of Cars 2, where, they manufactured the 2 to make it like, it look kind of mechanical and kind of fits the whole spy technology theme this movie's going for. And I really like the oil rig scene. It's really grim. I mean, this movie actually has kills in it to like it's almost like, a horror movie, but not a horror film because, it's a spy film. This movie's a spy thriller. I like the again, I think the opening scene is actually really well done. I think it actually kind of sets up the movie pretty well for the most part. Well, yes, I mean it has nothing to do with, it continuing off of the first cause. It's still a pretty cool scene. My second to last positive for Cars 2 is that it does look Cars 2 does look good on a visual standpoint, as I like the character's design of Lightning McQueen. He looks a little bit more flashier in this version, along with the other races. I like Finn and Harley's design. I like Axelrod's design a little bit, and Professor Z. And I like how the first two races actually look. So both Japan and Italy, they look pretty all right. Again, it has aged a little bit as it has gone on, but it isn't. They don't look too bad, as I say. And my final positive for Cars 2 is that I can tolerate mostly the first act with Tokyo. Besides the spy plot hijacking the movie, I think the race in Tokyo is actually really solid, and it is actually my favorite scene of Cars 2, as it's pretty it kind of gets away from the spy elements, and it also gets rid of Mater. Again, it gets rid of Mater for the most part. Besides it, having him follow Harley around, but I can tolerate the first act okayly. I can get through the first act mostly good, as the spy stuff is not really into the movie until we get halfway through it. But again, the first act is fine. Moving on to the mix element for Cars 2. Like the first Cars, the pacing does slow down a little bit at the end, mostly in the middle chunk of the movie with Italy. I feel like the middle chunk is the longest of the movie. Like the first act is actually not that long, and I feel like the middle act kind of takes up most of the runtime, but it's not bad, and I do like the movie. And also, this movie is also the runtime is less long as long as the original Cars. I think it might be maybe the shortest Cars movie. Maybe that's Cars 3. Who knows? Like I say, the pacing is is not bad in this movie, but again, I think it could have been I think the second act could have been a little bit less drawn out, and also the third act could have been also less drawn out. The next mixed aspect for Cars 2 is that I like how Cars 2 is more grim than the first film because the first movie kind of did get a little bit kind of grimmy at the end with the King's strip weathers his crash. Yes, that's his name. But unfortunately, the movie is mostly a kids movie, for the younger generation, as I say. Where this movie has a torture scene basically in it, and again, it has kills in this movie. I mean, I like how it is darker. I like kind of darker movies, especially if it's like a sequel to a more light-hearted film. Like in Cars 3 the movie kind of changes into a light-hearted sports film. Cars 2 is like more grim, as I say. I mean, there's like probably like 20 kills in this movie altogether. It's just a kids movie. This movie's just mostly kids, not adults, and it would probably kind of traumatize a kid if they're very young. Moving on to the musical score in this movie, this time Randy Newman did not come back for Cars 2. Instead, we got Michael Giacchino for giving us the score in this movie. This is the guy who did basically the Up, The Incredibles. He also did Mission Impossible 3. He also did Lightyear most recently. Surprisingly, I like how his score is actually I like his score in this movie compared to the first Cars movie. It's grim. It does still have, licensed music like all the Cars franchise, but I don't think the licensed music doesn't really hinder the movie as much. I even like, the Weasel song in this one as well. I like how it's grim. Again, I like this. It fits Cars 2 like a glove for me. The reason why it's mixed is that it doesn't fit the franchise as a whole. It only fits Cars 2, which is kind of a problem because, it makes the score stand out in a pretty, not bad way, but, It just makes it stand out for almost all the wrong reasons because, it's associated with this pretty mediocre film, as I say. It's again a guilty pleasure for me, but back to the review. Again, the musical score is good. I can enjoy the musical score for the most part, but again, it's mixed because it only fits Cars 2 and not the rest of the franchise, in my opinion. The second to last mixed element is the World Grand Prix concept. Because I like the Grand Prix concept, but the races are kind of there for me. Because they kind of just pick the most stock and generic locations like Japan, Italy, and then London at the end. Like, there's not a lot of world building in this movie compared to the first Cars, in my opinion. And we only get to see four places in the world. Like, why don't we get to see like I don't know, Austria or Germany or other countries that's more famous? They kind of just pick three random famous countries, and say, oh, let's do a World Grand Prix. I mean, most of the World Grand Prix is in Europe, not like say Australia or South America. Like, we don't really get to explore the world really much in Cars 2, to be honest. Like I said, I like it a lot because I still like the World Grand Prix because it fits with the Cars franchise, but it could have been better in my opinion. And my final mixed out element in this movie is actually the story direction because I like how it's trying to do something wildly different, but the execution is not good for of the concepts. Like I said, I like how it goes for a completely wild different turn for it, but at the same time, it's just the execution in this movie is pretty poor. And now, with the mix done, we are getting into the pretty long list of negatives for Cars 2. Yes, there's way more negatives than Cars 2. Honestly, I think I'm going to be talking about Cars 2 the most out of the franchise, for all the wrong reasons. Anyway, so starting off with the first negative, the tone is completely unbalanced in my opinion. Like I said, it goes from lighthearted to grim throughout this entire movie. It tries to juggle between the two emotions, but it doesn't really fit the movie at all. It just kind of makes it feel like a jumbled up mess at the end of the day. Like I said, the tone is just completely bad. And the story tone in this movie is executed to being pretty horrible to bad, as the lemon plot basically messes up the story's tone because of all the kills and all the torture scene. Yeah, there's a torture scene in this movie, as I already mentioned. It's just the tone is just it just doesn't feel there's no heart in this movie. Like I said, it's like it takes away all the heart from the first Cars movie, but it goes for like a more manufactured and futuristic direction, which I don't really like all that much. Another negative is actually Lightning McQueen in this movie. I did not like Lightning McQueen. I thought Lightning McQueen was kind of irritating in the first Cars movie. He's kind of worse in this version because he kind of is kind of a jerk throughout this film. Even though we're supposed to feel sorry for Mato for Lightning McQueen to scream at him, at the same time, Mato kind of deserves getting screamed at because because Mato basically messed up Lightning McQueen in the first race. And the reason why Lightning McQueen is a negative for me is that he is not really well used throughout the entire movie. Instead of Lightning, the guy who is actually in the main part of the poster and the DVD art. Instead, we get Mater as the main protagonist, which kind of falls into my next negative, which is Mater as the main protagonist instead of Lightning McQueen. Yeah, the guy that is a little bit into the poster, he's the protagonist in this version. And Mater is pretty annoying in this film. Like I cannot he's really irritating. I thought Mater was okay in the first film, and he was fine in the third film, but Mater in this film is just irritating. Like he kind of just acts like a. I know that he's not the smartest character, but he's just irritating. I mean, he literally does not tell Lightning McQueen that he has a bomb on him. He tries to be very vague, and honestly, Mater kind of just hijacks the entire movie throughout all of it. I get that Mater was, trying. I get that they turned Mater into basically, a character that the kids would like, but yeah, I just don't really like him as a protagonist in this version. He kind of just again. I don't think he is not the most brightest character, but he just acts like a kind of a big idiot in this version, to be honest. He's just kind of just not a good protagonist at all. In that we should have had Lightning McQueen as the protagonist, and that the whole spy element could have been erased, or they could have just split up the cars for it. Like they could have done a spy element in like another Pixar film, and not have to put it in Cars 2, which the sports and the spy element does not mix. Moving on though, the main villains in this one are pretty uninteresting. Besides Professor Z, none of the main villains are actually that threatening besides the two lead cars in this one. Like all they kind of do is just hurt, make them burn out of, make the race cars burn out because they want to frame a oil free company for giving them alternative fuel so that they can become rich because they make alternative fuel look bad. And they're just not, again, they're not really threatening. I mean, they are pretty easily defeated in the third act. I mean, Miles Axelrod, the main villain, spoiler alert, gets pretty easily, he gets really easily, defeated because Mater just corners him to make because he doesn't try to escape. He just stands there like an idiot. The only time they were actually threatening is probably when they were trying to torture the American spy. The torture scene where they killed an American spy for no reason besides to, just feel the sadism, I guess. They're just not interesting and they're not really a threat at all to Mater or Lightning McQueen or Finn or Holly. And again, Lightning McQueen is completely sidelined in this movie. Instead of him being the protagonist, Mater's the protagonist. We don't actually see Lightning McQueen at all in this movie. We only get to see him briefly during the race scenes and, when he was talking to, Uncle Topolino in Italy. And plus, Lightning McQueen doesn't really learn anything in this movie besides him just trying to be a better friend to Mater. He's just not there in this movie, and that kind of takes away the heart of Cars franchise because you're you're supposed to feel for Lightning McQueen, but in this one you can't really feel for him because he's just not there for all of it. The humor in this one is honestly pretty cringy. Like they probably the humor is has kind of aged a lot, even worse than probably the first Cars movie. Because there's toilet jokes, there's Cars farting, there's even a moment where Mato confuses wasabi with ice cream, and it's just not. I don't even laugh at this movie. Instead, the movie just kind of makes me cringy all the time. Like wants me to like it makes me just like yawn in boredom because I'm not entertained by the humor at all. It's just not good. And my next negative is that I feel like this movie also only exists to sell merchandise because of the first Cars success. While this movie did is the highest grossing of the Cars franchise, I honestly think this movie just this only one this movie only exists because they got enough money from the first Cars and decided, oh, let's just do a sequel, but now let's just put a plot twist in it so that it can be, I guess, more complex than the first Cars, which I don't think the movie should have gone more complex, to be honest. It's just really just I feel like they were also just trying to sell merchandise of, Mater with, spy elements in this movie. It just kind of feels like Pixar was trying to sell me something throughout the whole movie. And again, this movie has nothing to do with the first Cars movie. Like you could probably skip Cars 2 and just watch Cars 1 and 3 back to back because Cars 3 basically ignores Cars 2 for, basically for the most part. And Cars 2 is just kind of feels like a short, to be honest, like an extended short of, Mater's tunes, which actually came out about maybe the same time that Cars 2 came out. It's just that there's no, I mean, the movie doesn't even, the only thing it has to do with this one is that they kill off Doc Hudson in this movie because the actor for Doc Hudson did pass away between Cars 1 and Cars 2. And they kind of, kill him off in a kind of a disrespectful tone, with not really acknowledging him. To be honest, it's just that it just doesn't feel like. I mean, the only thing I guess is that this movie tries to go for Karate Kid Part 3 with Lightning McQueen at the top of the world, but besides that, it has nothing to do with the first Cars movie at all. The spy tone is pretty terrible and should have not even been in the movie. And it doesn't make any sense for a sports movie to become a spy movie anyway, because in the first Cars, it clearly established that the first Cars movie was a sports movie, not a movie. Because all the spy tone kind of does is just mess up the sports elements in this movie a lot. Sorry, but anyway, it's just that it's just it just kind of feels like it's been slapped on to the movie just to make sure that they can earn more money for a third movie. Which I felt Cause 2 kind of after Cause 2 was released, I felt like they should have stopped because Cause 2, but of course they went on to make Cause 3. But yeah, I just think the spy tone is just slapped on. The movie's big twist was extremely predictable and obvious who it was, and the twist did not make any sense at all. Because they just kind of picked a random person to be the main villain of this film. Because they decided to go with the stupid electric call that made the company and decides to sabotage his own company. And also, when I was young, it was pretty obvious who did it anyway. It was Miles Axelrod. He was probably the but again, it's just that the big twist did not make any sense. It's just not good. And speaking of Miles Axelrod, he's the blandest antagonist. He is the my least favorite of the Cars movie trilogy of the main villains. He's just uninteresting. I mean, his motives are not really interesting besides him trying to make more money off of, sabotaging his own events. He's just bland and uninteresting indeed. And this they and as I said, they sidelined the racing aspects for the spy aspects, which the spy aspects just lacks the charm and magic of the first movie because it's just not interesting. I mean, the spy aspects are cool, I guess, at like a visual standpoint, but story wise, it just messes up the whole movie. And unfortunately, this movie did kick off the misfires of Pixar movies with Brave and the Good Dinosaurs because I did not watch those two movies until they came out, like they first came out. And this movie was, the first movie that made me step away from Pixar for a little while until we got the first Inside Out movie, which is the first movie that kind of brought me out of the unholy trinity of these movies. Like I said, the I don't think Cars 2, Brave, and The Good Dinosaur are not bad movies, but they're, mediocre films. But moving on, the movie's third act is quite boring. It drags. Like I said, the second and third act kind of drags for me. It's just uninteresting. And like I said, like this is my opinion. You could put your own opinion in the comments below, just to remind you. But like I said, the third act just feels like it could have ended at one point, but it decides to just drag itself for another 10 minutes. This might be a minor nitpick, but I feel like the World Grand Prix was pretty honestly not really well executed. As I wish there was races in different countries, like I was saying. Like I wish there was one like in Australia or like South America or even in the USA or maybe China. But they just picked, oh, let's just pick England, Italy, Japan. Japan is going to be the coolest one, and it's going to be the opening act. Yeah, I just feel like they were just randomly picking anything. And the side characters of the original Cars movie is not in this movie, and are barely used. And most of the new side characters are really bland. I can't even remember some of the characters in this movie. Like they're just unmemorable in my opinion, and they're just not really well. I mean, I even have struggles remembering Finn and Holly because Finn kind of is just a show off in this movie, kind of, and he's kind of an idiot also. And also, this movie just tries to do way too much. Like, there's basically two different. I mean, there's basically two plots: Mater's plot and Lightning McQueen's plot. But of course, Mater takes most of the runtime, and Lightning McQueen barely has anything to do with it. But I feel like they just tried too much in this movie. Like, I wish they kind of went back to the simpler plots with the first Cars movie, but instead they just say, "Oh, let's just overcomplicate this movie." And the spy characters are pretty much very annoyingly oblivious to Tomato because throughout the whole movie, besides the very end, they believe Tomato was a spy the whole time, even though he was clearly a tow truck and not a spy. And he's just they're just they just kind of the writing was kind of they kind of just in the writing room. I feel like they kind of just dumbed down Holly and Finn because they just wanted the movie to work, even though it just makes the movie more irritating to get through. And honestly, this movie should have not been the true follow up to the first Cars. It feels like a kind of a spin off of Cars instead of a sequel to the first Cars movie. I actually feel like Cars 3 should have been the follow up to the original Cars, as it has much more things to do in the in that movie compared to the stuff in Cars 2. And I feel like the movie is just soulless. I mean, I feel like this movie was just kind of just manufactured to become like, oh, let's just get more money for Pixar so that we can manipulate, kids into watching this movie. Which is, not what Pixar does. I mean, I feel like Pixar's earlier movies kind of had an even split between, what they were thinking about adults and what they should do with kids. But no, they just go all we have to focus on the younger generation and not people who are adults. It just feels like again it's just again this movie just has nothing to do with the first Cars movie, as I said, and this movie just feels soulless. I don't feel like I said, Cars 2 is a guilty pleasure for me. It's not horrible, but it's not good. I just kinda feel nothing for it. I kinda just put on this movie to, kinda just laugh at kinda just, have laugh at its flaws for the most part, but it just kinda feels soulless. And this movie could have had the potential to be good, even with the spy plot, without Mater being in all of it, so that they could have so because if when Mater was in because they had to have Mater as the main protagonist, they kind of dumbed down the spy characters. But if Mater was not there, the spy characters could have been honestly more competent with their jobs. And without Mater, they could have both been again they could have been competent, and the movie could have been less irritating to watch. But of course, they had to put Himeda in as the main protagonist because they want to get money. But I mean, I'm not saying this movie's bad, but I mean, because it's a guilty pleasure. I mean, I feel like the whole Cars franchise has been a guilty pleasure for me. But it just kind of frustrates me that Cars 2 decides to tries to go this route instead of trying to be an actual follow up of the original. And this movie was clearly made for the kid sides mostly, instead of an even split between adults and kids, because in say Incredibles there was also adult elements in that movie, or Toy Story where there's also adult humor in those films. But nope, they just kind of just go all kid in this one, because there's even a toilet joke that kind of makes me laugh, but I mean, it's not. It's more focused on the kids side. It's kind of again, this movie just focuses on the lower end. And to be honest, the animation in Cars 2 looks extremely dull, uninteresting. It looks too bright at times. Like, well, yes, I get they wanted to do a gruffer image to fit the aspect, but it fails to make it makes the races less appealing, and the animation as a whole is nothing to write home about. Like, I feel like they just kind of take elements from the real world and just put cars in it and just say, "Hey, that's it. We made a Cars movie. Let's get this out before right after Toy Story 3." Yep, this film followed Toy Story 3, and they just kind of, I felt like the animation was kind of lazy in this version. I mean, it's not bad. I mean, I still like how it's like the Tokyo one looks kind of beautiful to a certain degree, but not really. I mean, it's just extremely dull and uninteresting. And again, my final negative of this movie, yes, this is the final negative after this pretty long list of flaws I have found in this movie. This was a terrible way that John Lasseter went out for his final movie that he directed as Pixar. I mean, this guy literally gave us, Toy Story and other films that were amazing. But yeah, I feel like John Lasseter was kind of just, thinking about more the kids side than, the adults in this film. And just didn't. I just felt like this was a bad send-off movie for John Lasseter, because the guy's kind of a genius when he's coming up with concepts. But I feel like he was trying to put his magic and put it in the Cars franchise, and it didn't really work out for him. It just didn't work for him this time, unlike his work in the first Cars movie. And yeah, that's it for the movie. Like I said, it's not a terrible movie. I can enjoy Cars 2. I can put it on in the background, but it's just a really flawed film. It's kind of a frustrating film. So it's gonna get a pretty low score on the grading portion. So let's jump right into the grading portion of 2011's Cars 2. Like I said, this movie went way down for me. It might be at the bottom of the Pixar movie once I rewatched Good Dinosaur and Brave and A Bug's Life. I haven't seen those films in a while. We'll just have to see. But here's the breakdown. The story gets an F. It's just not. It just doesn't fit the movie at all. It just feels like the story is just kind of frustrating. Like I said, I do like the aspects in the movie, but the racing aspects in the film. But unfortunately, it's just that the spy aspects kind of ruin the story for me. The characters get an F. Again, the characters are pretty irritating. I think there's like a couple I can tolerate, but mostly the characters are pretty irritating in this one. I can't really tolerate the characters in this film. The animation gets a C minus. It's fine. I mean, I think it's a little lazy with how they kind of just slap the real world element in it. It just feels like it's just copy and pasted, and just there was no effort in the animation in my opinion. And finally, the musical score gets a B minus. It's the highest grade that this film gets. I think the musical score is actually pretty good and decent throughout the most part, but I feel like it just kind of fits the Cars 2 and not the rest of the franchise. But it's a good score by Michael Giacchino. And now I'm gonna assign bonus points, but I'm gonna take away 4 bonus points for the story and characters, because the story just doesn't work in this film, and the characters are just kind of irritating. So this brings it down from a 63% all the way down to a 62%. So that means Cars 2 earns a grade of a D minus. And I recommend that you skip this movie only if you can tolerate the characters, humor, and strange story. But again, this is my opinion. 2 out of 5. Again, this movie is not a terrible movie. I can enjoy it. It's a guilty pleasure for me, and I have nostalgic for this one. But it's just that this movie is just kind of went down for me as I age, and it's just kind of feels like this movie was just made to capitalize after the somewhat success of the first Cars movie. And that is my review. Please put your review, or what you think about Cars 2. Please put in your grades, and just tell me what you think about Cars 2. And my next review, I'll be doing the third movie, Cars 3. But I think there's gonna be no more videos for the rest of the year because Christmas is here, and I'm gonna take some time to think about other videos I'm gonna do in the future. But this is the Mega Man Gamer signing out, and see you all in 2025.